How much performance can you get out of a tiny PC before you thermal throttle? Well, I got some results for you. Probably not that surprising, but still some results. Let's roll that intro. Welcome to Simple Run, and back to another video on the InWin B1. And probably the last one. I think it'll be the last one. We'll see though. So last time you seen this, I had an 11600K in there that I downclocked to a point of, well, it wasn't really worth having 11600K in there anymore. In its current state, it has a 5700G. Has the ASRock ITX, which is very similar to the one on the Intel, has the same exact RAM and the same exact SSD. So really the biggest difference is the motherboard, which is a similar model, and the even bigger difference is the CPU. Now, on this one I'm going to be going over basically my results and what I found. Now before I kick into that, don't forget to subscribe. Comment down below, you know, if you've experienced this, or if you have different ways to test this, or you know, just tell me what you think of the build in general. So back to this. What I did my run on was Cinebench R23.2, and I did that for both. Now on the 11600K I did test that on an open bench. I didn't test the 5700G on an open bench, although I probably should have. But it gives you a decent idea of, one, how restrictive this case is, but two, just how this is not ideal for a K series for Intel. Now you might be asking, what cooler's on there? Well, it's the Noctua LH9. Now I did buy it for the Intel, and then I bought the bracket and I stuffed it on the AMD. So it's the exact same cooler I used for both. The full-size Noctua 80mm fan for exhaust as well. And it's really hard not to drill holes in this case because it doesn't circulate. And that's where we start to see the thermal results. So let's start out with Intel because that's what I had it on first. Now for open bench, it was running about 80C, and its multi-core score was 9344. Now that was open bench where it could breathe. Once I rammed it into this case, it started hitting 100C. In fact, it kept hitting 100C, which then down throttled it from the peak of 4.9 down to 3.4, and that is what it ran Cinebench at the whole time. It was just too hot, and that dropped the score to 7,984. Sorry, I keep looking down. My notes are right here, so I'm trying to read the notes, watch the screen. Either way, that's what I'm doing. So that's a big difference. In fact, 1,400 points difference just putting it in this case. Now the other thing you gotta realize too is that's not what the 11600K can do. That's what it's doing when I'm restraining it to 65 watts. That is what I limited that package to, was 65 watts. And that's what it was on the test bench as well, because this cooler is only going to cool so much power. And as soon as you start increasing those watts, it starts struggling. Now when I ran it single, it did stay at the 4.9, but it still kept hitting 100C, and it had a score of 5558 single core. Now again, this is Cinebench R23.2, running 10-minute cycles each time, letting it cool down between tests and going again. Now let's compare that to the 5700G. Now, I know, the 5700G is about $100 more than 11600K. And depending on when you get motherboards, you may, you know, narrow that gap with the motherboard cost, but, you know, you might not, depending on the market, which is crazy right now. So that one did thermal throttle too, which I was kind of surprised. I didn't think it would. But you also got to remember, you got 8 cores, 16 threads. So if Intel 6 cores, 12 threads was doing it, then, you know, AMD's probably going to as well. Now, it only hit 95C. I know I say only, which that's still hotter than you want it running. But it stayed at 95C. It did thermal throttle down from 4.6 to 3.7, but that 3.7 is still better than Intel's 3.4, right? So 8 cores, 16 threads at 3.7, or sorry, 8 cores, 16 threads, or 6 cores, 12 threads at 3.4. You can see that performance gap. In fact, your multi-score was almost 13,000. It was 12,851. So that is over 3,000 higher than the 11600K limited at 65 watts on the open test bench. And it did that in this case, right? So yeah, you're hitting 95C, but it could maintain it. It didn't go over that. It's still hotter than you want to run, but Cinebench is running everything at 100% non-stop. So, you know, can it do it? I think so. And really, if you modified this case with a little bit of breathing room, I think you could drop that down to 90 or below. You know, but in reality, what are you going to be running that's going to be pushing it that hard? Chances are nothing. In my fiance's case, probably nothing. So that is worst case, and that's of course is not ideal. Now to just knock out the single core, running the single core, it stayed at 84C, right? That's reasonable. I'm happy with that. Now its score was lower than Intel. It had 1400 rather than your 1558, but you know, that's still not bad. And at 84C compared to single core Intel hitting 100C over and over, you know, it's easy to see why people are picking AMD. When the 12400 comes out, or the 12600, would that be more comparative? Maybe. It's also going to be a lot more expensive. A lot more expensive. So I think right now, the best performance you're going to get out of something like this is the 5700G. And honestly, if you went with the 5600G, you'd lose a little bit of performance, but your temperatures would probably stay where you want it. And ideally, that'd probably be a good place to be. I will admit this is overkill. This is more than, you know, what you're probably going to need at a desk where you're doing mostly, you know, Cricut stuff, which is a lot of just pictures and not even quite to the standard of what Photoshop is. And then a lot of internet time. So I'm happy with this build. And now I get to give it to my fiance and let her test it out, and hopefully she's happy with it as well. I don't know that I have a whole lot more to cover in this, because, you know, that was the main thing I wanted to point out, was your thermal differences, your performance differences, and, you know, what you can really do in a tiny package. Now, if you can find a smaller case with better airflow, you might be able to run that 5700G even better. But man, AMD really knocked it out of the park with the 5700G, and when they can get that integrated graphics up even better, I look forward to seeing what they can do. Now, don't forget to subscribe, you know, comment below, like the video, dislike the video, you do you. With that, thanks for watching.